Imagine the lights flickering out across an entire city, plunging hospitals into darkness as backup generators sputter and fail under the strain of a widespread grid collapse, leaving ventilators silent and life-saving equipment powerless while panicked crowds surge toward emergency rooms that can no longer function, turning routine medical care into a desperate fight for survival amid the chaos of a blackout that stretches from hours into days or weeks. This isn't a distant hypothetical, it's the harsh reality exposed in prolonged power outages like those during Hurricane Katrina or the Texas winter storm, where medical systems crumbled, revealing vulnerabilities that amplify every injury and illness into potential catastrophe. We often misunderstand these events as mere inconveniences, assuming that emergency services will always rebound quickly. But this overlooks how interdependent modern healthcare is on continuous electricity, from refrigeration for medications to electronic monitoring devices, leading many to underestimate the rapid escalation of health crises in a grid-down scenario. Beneath this surface lies the hidden science of emergency medical prepping, grounded in principles of pharmacology, physiology, and resource management, where strategic stockpiling and alternative techniques can bridge the gap when professional help evaporates. Evidence from disaster response studies, such as those by the World Health Organization on power failures in conflict zones, shows that simple interventions like manual wound irrigation and improvised splinting have saved lives when advanced tech fails, highlighting how basic anatomical knowledge applied tactically can alter outcomes. The survival implications are profound without these preps. A minor cut risks sepsis in contaminated environments, or chronic conditions like diabetes spiral out of control without insulin storage, forcing individuals to become their own first responders in ways that demand foresight and training. As the blackout deepens, what begins as isolated medical emergencies cascades into widespread public health breakdowns, with waterborne diseases surging due to failed sanitation systems, pushing us toward the next layer of preparation, understanding how to fortify personal medical kits against such escalations. In the thickening shadow of a prolonged grid collapse, the danger intensifies as pharmacies shutter and supply chains halt, leaving those reliant on daily medications stranded without refills, where a heart patient's missed dose could trigger arrhythmia, or a diabetic's insulin shortage leads to ketoacidosis, transforming quiet homes into scenes of silent suffering amid the blackout's unrelenting grip. Analyzing this, we see that the human body's metabolic processes don't pause for disasters. Glucose regulation, blood pressure control, and immune responses continue demanding intervention. Yet in a power void, the infrastructure for drug distribution vanishes, exposing the fragility of just-in-time medical logistics. A common misunderstanding is that over-the-counter alternatives suffice indefinitely, ignoring how potency degrades without proper storage or how substitutions can cause adverse interactions, leading to preventable complications that compound the crisis. The hidden science here delves into pharmacokinetics and thermodynamics, revealing techniques like using zeolite packets for moisture control in storage or calculating half-lives to rotate stockpiles effectively, principles often overlooked in standard first aid training but essential for long-term viability. Supporting evidence comes from FEMA's after-action reports on events like the Puerto Rico blackout post-Hurricane Maria, where improvised medication management reduced mortality rates in isolated communities, demonstrating that knowledge of drug stability under varying temperatures can be life-saving. Survival implications extend to building resilience through diversified kits, incorporating items like broad-spectrum antibiotics sourced legally via prescriptions and stored in vacuum-sealed bags, ensuring that one can mitigate infections or manage pain without external aid, thereby extending operational capacity in isolation. This escalation breeds further threats as opportunistic infections rise in overcrowded shelters with poor hygiene, necessitating a transition to exploring wound care innovations that prevent such outbreaks from overwhelming personal defenses. As the blackout drags on, the peril mounts with unchecked bleeding from injuries sustained in the dark, slips on unlit stairs, or cuts from scavenging, turning survivable wounds into hemorrhagic shocks that drain life without swift intervention, especially when ambulances can't navigate gridlocked, powerless streets. Breaking this down analytically, we recognize that coagulation cascades in the body require not just pressure, but sometimes adjuncts like hemostatic agents to accelerate clot formation, a process disrupted when medical facilities lose power for sterilization and lighting. People often misconstrue basic bandages as adequate, failing to account for how arterial bleeds demand more than compression alone, or how environmental contaminants accelerate infection rates in open wounds during prolonged outages. Uncovering the hidden science involves hemostasis biology and material engineering, where substances like chitosan-derived powders promote rapid clotting by adhering to wet surfaces, a technology derived from crustacean shells that's underutilized in civilian preps but proven in military trauma kits. Empirical evidence from studies in the Journal of Trauma and Acute Care Surgery illustrates how these agents reduced blood loss by up to 90% in field tests, paralleling real-world applications in disaster zones like the Haiti earthquake, where power failures hampered surgical responses. The implications for survival are critical. Integrating such tools into a prep kit allows for self-treatment of lacerations, preserving blood volume and mobility essential for evasion or resource gathering, thus maintaining functionality amid chaos. Yet this danger escalates as dehydration from blood loss intersects with failing water supplies, heightening the risk of hypovolemic shock, which steers us toward hydration strategies fused with medical oversight in collapse conditions. Deep into the grid, down abyss, the threat evolves into rampant dehydration and electrolyte imbalances that silently erode organ function, where a simple lack of clean water during blackout-induced pump failures leads to kidney shutdowns or cardiac arrhythmias, claiming lives in ways more insidious than overt violence. Analytically, this stems from the body's osmoregulation mechanisms, which rely on balanced sodium, potassium pumps disrupted by fluid deficits, exacerbated when refrigeration for oral rehydration solutions fails, turning a survivable scenario into organ failure. A widespread misunderstanding is that any water source will do in emergencies, disregarding how pathogens like E. coli proliferate in stagnant systems without powered filtration, leading to gastrointestinal disasters that worsen dehydration cycles. The hidden science emerges in emergency hydrology and biochemistry, with methods like solar distillation or hypochlorite dosing to purify water, coupled with homemade electrolyte formulas using precise ratios of salts and sugars to mimic IV fluids orally. Backed by CDC guidelines from outbreak responses in power-compromised areas, such as during the California wildfires, these techniques have maintained hydration in thousands, preventing acute renal injuries through evidence-based formulations. Survival-wise, this means preppers can sustain cognitive and physical performance by stockpiling chlorine tablets and measuring scoops, avoiding the delirium that hampers decision-making in crisis. As this intensifies, intersecting with nutritional deficits from spoiled food stocks, it propels us to the brink of malnutrition's medical toll, demanding adaptive foraging and supplementation tactics. With the collapse's grip tightening, dangers shift to nutritional voids that weaken immune systems, inviting opportunistic diseases like pneumonia in the cold, unheated aftermath of a blackout where perishable foods rot without power, leaving bodies starved of vitamins and proteins essential for cellular repair. Examining this, we note that metabolic pathways for energy production falter without micronutrients, leading to conditions like beriberi from thiamine deficiency or scurvy from absent vitamin C, issues amplified in grid-down isolation where resupply is impossible. Commonly, individuals assume canned goods cover all bases, but this ignores shelf life limits and the need for balanced macronutrients, resulting in muscle wasting that impairs mobility and strength. Delving into the hidden science of nutritional biochemistry and preservation engineering, we find vacuum sealing with oxygen absorbers extends viability, while sprouting seeds provides fresh enzymes, techniques rooted in agricultural science but vital for emergency sustenance. Evidence from USAID programs in famine-struck regions post disasters shows that such methods bolstered recovery rates by fortifying diets against deficiencies, with blood tests confirming restored hemoglobin levels. For survival, this translates to curating kits with multivitamins and high-calorie bars, ensuring endurance for tasks like fortification or evacuation, thus countering the physical decline that dooms the unprepared. Escalation occurs as weakened states invite vector-borne illnesses in stagnant water pools, transitioning us to pest control and prophylactic measures in medical prepping. The Blackout's unrelenting siege brings forth the hazard of vector-transmitted infections surging in the absence of powered pest management, where mosquitoes breed in untreated standing water, spreading maladies like West Nile virus that overwhelm underprepared immune systems, turning bites into fevers that debilitate entire groups. Analytically, this arises from entomology and epidemiology, where insect life cycles accelerate in warm, humid post-collapse environments without air conditioning or screens, facilitating pathogen transmission rates that spike exponentially. A frequent misunderstanding is that repellents alone suffice, overlooking how integrated pest management requires environmental modifications like eliminating breeding sites, which many neglect in favor of chemical overreliance. The hidden science lies in botanical repellents and barrier technologies, using permethrin-treated clothing derived from chrysanthemum extracts that bind to fabrics for weeks, a principle validated in vector control research. Studies from the Lancet on malaria prevention in blackout-prone developing areas provide evidence showing a 70% reduction in incidence through such treated gear combined with netting. Survival implications involve outfitting kits with these items to maintain operational health, preventing downtime from illness that could prove fatal in resource-scarce settings. As threats compound with rodent infestations carrying hantavirus, this escalates to broader hygiene protocols, leading us into sanitation's critical role in collapse medicine. Amid the deepening darkness of grid failure, sanitation breakdowns pose lethal risks as sewage systems overflow without electric pumps, fostering bacterial outbreaks like cholera that ravage digestive tracts, causing fatal fluid loss in hours if untreated, a silent killer in crowded, unpowered enclaves. Breaking it down, we see that microbial ecology thrives in anaerobic conditions of backed-up waste, with pathogens multiplying at rates dictated by temperature and moisture, unchecked by modern wastewater treatment. People often misjudge the efficacy of makeshift toilets, ignoring cross-contamination paths that spread via hands or flies, underestimating the chain reaction of epidemics. Unlocking the hidden science of environmental microbiology and engineering, composting latrines with carbon-rich additives like sawdust neutralize odors and pathogens through thermophilic decomposition, a process harnessing bacterial heat to sterilize waste. Evidence from WHO implementations in refugee camps during power outages confirms pathogen reduction to safe levels within weeks, averting outbreaks that claimed lives elsewhere. In terms of survival, this empowers individuals to establish hygienic zones, preserving group health and preventing the dysentery that saps strength for defense or foraging. This peril heightens as contaminated water intersects with wounds, amplifying infection dangers, which transitions us to advanced disinfection strategies for medical sustainability. As the collapse endures, the menace of untreated chronic conditions looms larger, with hypertension unchecked leading to strokes in the stress of blackout survival, where medication access vanishes and monitoring devices lie dormant, silently building pressure until catastrophe strikes. Analytically, cardiovascular physiology reveals how adrenaline surges from uncertainty elevate blood pressure, compounded by salt-heavy preserved foods without fresh alternatives, straining vessels already vulnerable. A common oversight is believing lifestyle adjustments alone compensate, disregarding how genetic factors and age demand pharmacological support that's unavailable in disruptions. The hidden science encompasses herbal pharmacology and monitoring hacks, using devices like manual sphygmomanometers and botanicals such as hawthorn berry extracts that dilate vessels per clinical trials, principles from ethnobotany adapted for emergencies. Backed by meta-analysis in the Journal of Hypertension from off-grid communities, These approaches stabilized pressures, reducing event rates by 40%. Survival means incorporating analog tools and plant knowledge into preps, sustaining vitality for long-haul endurance against the odds. Escalating, this intersects with mental health strains from isolation, propelling us toward psychological resilience techniques in medical frameworks. In the prolonged void of power loss, psychological dangers emerge as isolation and uncertainty breed anxiety disorders that manifest physically, insomnia weakening immunity, or panic attacks mimicking heart failures, eroding the will to survive when medical intervention is out of reach. Analyzing this, neurochemistry shows cortisol floods disrupting sleep cycles and decision-making, intensified by the blackouts, sensory deprivation, and constant threats. Misunderstandings abound, with many dismissing mental prep as secondary, not realizing how untreated stress accelerates physical decline through inflammation. Hidden science in cognitive behavioral therapy and neuropharmacology offers tools like breathing protocols to activate parasympathetic responses or natural sedatives from valerian root, grounded in receptor binding studies. Evidence from military psychology research during extended field ops without resupply demonstrates reduced breakdown incidents through these methods, with biomarkers showing lowered cortisol. For survival, this equips preppers to maintain mental acuity, crucial for strategic planning and group cohesion. As despair spreads, it escalates to self-harm risks, transitioning to community medical support structures. The grid's collapse ushers in amplified dangers from environmental exposures, like hypothermia in unheated winters where body core temperatures drop fatally without intervention, a risk heightened by wet clothing in rain-soaked blackouts without drying facilities. Dissecting this, thermoregulation biology dictates heat loss via conduction and convection, accelerated in power-less environments lacking insulation. Often, people underestimate layered clothing science, ignoring wicking fabrics that manage moisture to prevent conductive cooling. The hidden science involves material physics and physiology, with mylar blankets reflecting 90% of body heat via radiant barriers, a technology from space exploration adapted for earthbound crises. NASA-derived studies and Red Cross field tests evidence their efficacy in stabilizing temperatures during outages, preventing organ shutdown. Survival implications include packing these in kits for rapid deployment, preserving energy for mobility and tasks. This threat worsens with frostbite and extremities, leading to the need for rewarming protocols in medical prepping. In the frigid grasp of a blackout winter, frostbite emerges as a stealthy assassin, gnawing at fingers and toes, where circulation falters in sub-zero conditions without heated shelters, leading to tissue necrosis that demands amputation in the absence of medical facilities. A gruesome escalation from mere cold exposure to permanent disability amid the collapse's chill. Analytically, this peril roots in cryobiology, where ice crystals form in extracellular spaces, rupturing cells and inflaming tissues as blood flow constricts to preserve core warmth, a protective mechanism that backfires in prolonged unpowered scenarios without rewarming aids. A prevalent misunderstanding is that rubbing affected areas restores heat, but this actually worsens damage by dislodging crystals and causing further trauma, a myth perpetuated by outdated folklore that ignores vascular dynamics. The hidden science uncovers controlled rewarming protocols using immersion in 104-degree Fahrenheit water baths or body-to-body heat transfer, principles from hypothermia research that emphasize gradual thawing to prevent reperfusion injury. Evidence from Arctic expedition reports and military cold weather trials, documented by the U.S. Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine, shows these methods halved amputation rates by preserving microcirculation integrity. Survival implications demand, including chemical heat packs and insulated wraps in medical kits, enabling field treatment to salvage limbs and maintain dexterity for critical tasks like tool handling or signaling. As frostbite cases multiply in communal huddles, this danger spirals into widespread mobility loss, compromising group evacuation, which transitions us to orthopedic preps for injury management in rugged terrains. Venturing further into the blackout's hazards, orthopedic injuries like fractures from falls on darkened, debris-strewn paths become debilitating threats, immobilizing survivors and inviting complications such as compartment syndrome without timely splinting, turning a simple break into a limb, threatening emergency in the void of powered diagnostics. Breaking it down, biomechanics reveal how forces exceed bone tensile strength in slips, with swelling compressing nerves and vessels if not decompressed, amplified by the inability to access X-rays or casts in grid-down isolation. Commonly, people overlook the need for improvised immobilization, assuming rest alone heals. But this disregards how misalignment leads to malunion and chronic pain, underestimating the role of stabilization in recovery. Hidden science in materials engineering and anatomy introduces techniques like using SAM splints, moldable foam, aluminum hybrids, or fashioning them from branches and duct tape, allowing conformation to limbs for support without circulation cutoff. Backed by orthopedic studies from disaster zones like the Nepal earthquake, where power outages delayed surgeries, these improvisations maintained alignment in 80% of cases per field medic logs, averting deformities. For survival, this means curating kits with versatile splints and ACE bandages, ensuring continued functionality for foraging or defense, bolstering resilience against the physical toll of chaos. Escalation hits when untreated breaks foster infections in open compounds, steering toward antibiotic stewardship in collapse medicine. As the grid collapse persists, the specter of antibiotic-resistant infections rises, where overused or improperly stored drugs fail against superbugs breeding in unsanitary conditions, transforming minor abrasions into systemic sepsis that overwhelms the body's defenses without laboratory-guided therapy. Analytically, microbiology details how selective pressure from erratic dosing accelerates resistance genes, exacerbated in blackouts by the lack of refrigeration for sensitive antibiotics like tetracyclines, leading to expired efficacy. A frequent misunderstanding is that all antibiotics are interchangeable, ignoring spectrum specificity. Penicillins for strep versus fluoroquinolones for gram-negatives, resulting in treatment failures that hasten mortality. The hidden science explores pharmacodynamics and stewardship with rotation strategies and potentiators like clavulanic acid to combat beta-lactamases, principles from infectious disease protocols adapted for lay use. Evidence from CDC analyses of post-hurricane outbreaks in powerless regions shows prudent use extended drug utility, reducing resistance emergence by 50% in monitored groups. Survival implications involve legal stockpiling of varied classes with expiration tracking, empowering self-administration to curb infections before they necessitate evacuation, preserving autonomy. This threat intensifies as viral co-infections exploit weakened hosts, transitioning to antiviral preps and immune modulation tactics. Deepening the blackout's medical siege, viral epidemics exploit the chaos, with respiratory pathogens like influenza spreading unchecked in close quarters without ventilation systems, causing pneumonia that drowns lungs in fluid absent mechanical support, a cascade from cough to respiratory arrest. Examining this, virology illustrates envelope breaches via aerosols thriving in humid, unfiltered air of blacked-out buildings, where herd immunity erodes without vaccinations. Often, individuals dismiss herbal antivirals as pseudoscience, failing to recognize evidence-based options that inhibit replication, underappreciating adjunctive therapies in resource denial, uncovering hidden science in immunology. Elderberry extracts block hemagglutinin per in vitro studies, while zinc lozenges shorten duration by interfering with RNA polymerase. Tools from nutritional medicine for viral mitigation. Supported by meta-reviews in the Cochrane database from flu seasons in developing areas with intermittent power, these reduced symptom severity in 60% of users. In survival terms, integrating them into kits bolsters innate immunity, allowing focus on hydration and rest to outlast outbreaks, maintaining operational readiness. As viruses mutate amid stress, escalation to bacterial superinfections demands holistic approaches, leading us to diagnostic hacks without tech. In the unyielding night of power failure, the challenge of diagnosing ailments without instruments heightens risks. where symptoms like abdominal pain could signal appendicitis or mere indigestion, leading to fatal delays if misjudged in the absence of ultrasounds or labs, turning uncertainty into peril. Analytically, clinical reasoning relies on history and palpation, but blackouts strip confirmatory tools, forcing reliance on probabilistic models from emergency medicine algorithms. A common error is relying on pain location, ignoring referred pain pathways that mislead, such as shoulder tip from diaphragmatic irritation. The hidden science lies in physical exam refinements and Bayesian diagnostics, using rebound tenderness tests or Rovsing's sign for appendicitis, techniques honed in austere medicine training. Evidence from MSF field manuals in war-torn, powerless zones validates their accuracy, with 75% positive predictive value in surgical decisions. Survival means mastering these in preps through manuals and practice, enabling triage to prioritize interventions like herbal anti-inflammatories, averting unnecessary risks. This diagnostic fog escalates with neurological symptoms mimicking strokes, propelling toward neuro-protective strategies in kits. The collapse's medical frontier brings neurological emergencies to the fore, like concussions from blacked-out collisions causing brain swelling without CT scans, evolving into herniation syndromes that claim cognition and life in isolation. Dissecting this, neurophysiology shows axonal shearing from impacts with edema building pressure absent monitoring, compounded by the inability to evacuate clots. People frequently underestimate rest's role, pushing activity that worsens secondary injury via excitotoxicity. Hidden science in neuroprotective agents includes magnesium sulfate infusions or oral analogs to block NMDA receptors, drawn from trauma research to mitigate glutamate storms. Backed by trials in the New England Journal of Medicine from head injury cohorts in remote areas, these halved progression rates. For survival, kits with electrolytes and anti-emetics sustain brain function, ensuring judgment for group leadership. Escalation intersects with seizures from electrolyte shifts, transitioning to seizure management protocols. Amid blackout-induced vulnerabilities, seizures triggered by dehydration or meds withdrawal pose convulsive threats, where uncontrolled muscle contractions lead to aspiration or fractures without anticonvulsants, a rapid descent in unmonitored settings. Analytically, electrophysiology details neuronal hyperexcitability from ion imbalances, rampant in stress without powered infusion pumps. Misconceptions include restraining during events, which risks injury, ignoring safety positioning. The hidden science employs buccal midazolam or improvised lorazepam for termination, per epilepsy guidelines adapted for lay rescuers. Evidence from ILI studies in disaster-prone regions shows bystander interventions stopped 90% of prolonged fits. Survival implications: stock rescue meds legally, training and administration to prevent status epilepticus, safeguarding continuity. As neurological loads rise, this leads to pediatric-specific preps for vulnerable young. In the shadowed realm of grid failure, pediatric medical dangers amplify, with children's higher metabolic rates accelerating dehydration from diarrhea in contaminated water, leading to shock faster than in adults without scaled interventions, a disproportionate toll in collapse. Breaking it down, pediatric physiology features immature kidneys less efficient at concentrating urine, demanding precise fluid calculations absent pediatricians. Often, caregivers approximate doses by weight inaccurately, risking toxicity or inefficacy. Hidden science in dosing nomograms and rehydration formulas uses WHO packets adjusted for body surface area, ensuring osmolar balance. Supported by UNCF data from blackout famines, these saved infant lives by 70%. Survival tailor kits with syringes and charts protecting future generations. Escalation to growth stunting from malnutrition shifts to long-term endocrine management. The prolonged blackout unveils endocrine disruptions as insidious foes, where thyroid imbalances from iodine scarcity cause goiters and fatigue, sapping energy for survival tasks without lab tests or supplements, a slow burn to debility. Analytically, hormone synthesis halts without trace elements, affecting basal metabolism in calorie-restricted states. Underestimation of kelp or salt iodization ignores bioavailability. Hidden science's seaweed, derived iodine with storage stability, per nutritional endocrinology. Evidence from endemic area interventions shows normalized TSH levels. Survival include in kits for sustained vigor. This ties to reproductive health, transitioning to obstetric emergency preps. As collapse endures, obstetric crises surge, with pregnancies complicated by blackout stress leading to preterm labor or hemorrhage without monitors, endangering mothers and infants in home deliveries. Examining this, placental physiology falters under cortisol, risking abruption. Misjudging contraction patterns delays aid. Hidden science. Midwifery tools like fetoscopes for heart tones from obstetrics manuals. Backed by rural birth studies, improved outcomes by 50%. Survival kits with sterile gloves and clamps for safe births. Escalation to postpartum infections leads to gynecological antimicrobial strategies.